Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but Michigan is
Yeah.
officially back. They're back, baby.
They are back. They are back. And coming off a 23-day layoff, we've seen what other teams have done coming off long layoffs. To come off a 23-day layoff and win a game at the Kohl Center against a ranked Wisconsin team. I get it's not the Kohl Center that we're used to with fans, but it's still a road game against a ranked team, a team that I think I had preseason like number 6 or 7 in the country, which Robbie Hummel told me I was crazy. What I told him was I felt like out of the gates, Wisconsin would be better than a lot of teams because they had everybody back. I never bought into their talent level, but I bought into the fact that they were a team that did really well the second half of last year and they returned everything. And they did pretty well coming out of the gates. But yeah, Michigan, listen, I can't say enough about this team now. I was so wrong about them in the preseason. I had them ranked like 42nd or something like that. And a lot of it was I didn't know how good Mike Smith would be. And I felt like if you don't have a point guard, I don't care what you got around him. I love Hunter Dickinson. I always loved Hunter Dickinson. I like, Livers, obviously terrific player. We didn't know how good Chande Brown was going to be coming in on his role. So Michigan, you've completely won me over. Juwan Howard, you have completely won me over. You are the outlier to the former NBA player who's made $100 million and is successful coaching college basketball.
Yeah, so I'm not ready to say that Michigan belongs in the same tier as Baylor and Gonzaga because they are I think those two teams have set themselves apart from everybody else. Michigan had a slip up where they lost by 20 to a Minnesota team that can't beat Maryland, right?
True.
Gonzaga's never had that. Baylor's never had that. So I think that there's a different level there. But I think that all of those conversations we had about who is the third best team in college basketball are completely moot now and complete waste of time. And we're so dumb that we didn't just say, hey, you know what? It's Michigan. And for me, look, here's what made that win so impressive, right? If you go back and Brendan Quinn over at The Athletic had some really good stuff on kind of what Michigan went through during their time off. So I would suggest that you go sign up to The Athletic and go read his content. If you are a Michigan fan, if you're not doing it already, I don't know what you are doing with your life. But it was basically like they weren't allowed to get into the Michigan athletic facilities for 2 weeks, except for COVID testing. Right. The only thing that they could do was do recorded workouts from their house that were sent to them by the Michigan strength and conditioning coach, which if you're in your house or your apartment or your dorm, how much work are you actually doing? There was a quote from, I think it was Isaiah Livers that he gave to Brendan that said, when our first practice back, it felt like our first practice in the summer, just because of how tired you were and how quickly you kind of lost it. And when they came in on Sunday, they got behind by 14, right?
Yep.
They were down big early, and they came all the way back, but it wasn't like a thing where they just started forcing turnovers. And it wasn't a thing where it's like they hit a whole bunch of threes and just had this 17-0 run that came out of nothing because Wisconsin melted down. What happened was they sat in the stands for 30 seconds on every single possession and made life hell for Wisconsin. They allowed it was 0.58 points per possession in the second half after giving up 1.37 points per possession in the first half. What they did was just play tough defense for 30 seconds every possession. And that takes such a toll on your legs.
Yes.
If you're sitting in a stance and sliding for 30 seconds, that is how you wear yourself out. And they did it despite not being in shape, despite being down 14 on the road against a team that doesn't give up comebacks like that. Wisconsin doesn't turn the ball over. They don't make mistakes. They drain the clock better than anybody in college basketball this side of Tony Bennett.
I will put that.
That was one of the most impressive performances.
I was just going to say that all year of any team anywhere. Period. I mean, again, you'll go through and say, well, Gonzaga pounding the crap out of whether it's Iowa, whether it's Virginia, whatever. There were some impressive performances. When you add in the fact that they were off and unable to do what so many. Now they were smart too. They didn't come right back. Now they couldn't, right? But some teams are. Some teams are coming right off a pause and playing 4 days later. Michigan, Juwan Howard was at least smart enough to look at the bigger picture, and they could. They had to protect their equity they have built up, right? You can't come out of the gates, lose this one, and then you're worried about your kid's psyche a little bit, right? All that. So they were smart enough to say, we're not going to play sooner than we feel we're ready to play.
Yeah, and honestly, like it should be like that for everybody else in the country.
But it's not.
You know,
but it's not.
It's not.
It's not.
To me, it's like a player health and player safety issue to come back.
That's the NCAA's fault. That's the NCAA's fault for not moving back the NCAA tournament. That's the problem. When they didn't move back the NCAA tournament from March to May, which they could have done, I'm told. They could have done it. Like TV would have done it. Then ultimately what they did there was say every team that was coming off a 14-day pause, especially early on, because they didn't know if they were going to get their 13 games in to be eligible for the postseason. They're all rushing back. And even now, some of them are going to rush back if they don't have 13 games. Well, who the hell cares? I mean, it's so stupid. Like, all they had to do was push it back to May. Nothing's going on in May. Nothing's going on. Like, could have easily done this so the teams wouldn't have had to rush back.
And it's not just the rushing back. Like, so Fred Hoiberg was talking about this the other day, and we kind of mentioned it briefly on the podcast yesterday. But the schedule that Nebraska is being forced to play, it's like it's honestly, it should be considered unacceptable.
Right. You're right.
There's the player welfare is just like there's no consideration for it whatsoever. They're playing 7 games in 12 days in 5 states.
They don't care at all.
It's a joke. It's a joke. And putting those kids through that, it's just I got the schedule right here. So here's what they played. On Saturday, February 6th, they were at Michigan State. That Monday, the 8th, they were at Minnesota. On that Wednesday, they played home against Wisconsin. On Friday, they played at home against Illinois. Yesterday, they were at Penn State. Tomorrow, they're at Maryland. Wednesday, they're at Maryland. That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games between February 6th and February 17th, playing in Maryland, in Pennsylvania, in Nebraska, in Minnesota, and in Michigan. That should not be acceptable. That should not be something that is happening in college basketball this year.
I got one for you. And I tweeted it. SIU Edwardsville. We'll get to it today on today's slate. SIU Edwardsville is playing its 13th game in 25 days today. 13th game. They're playing Murray State at home. I mean, like, how is this? How is it right? How is it right? And again, part of this is on the NCAA. Part of it is on obviously the Ohio Valley Conference. Because this isn't what SIU Edwardsville wants to do, but this is the schedule they're dealt. They're going to play these games, and you know what? I am shocked, Rob. I am absolutely shocked that we haven't had more like major injuries this season. Now maybe we have, and we just don't know it. But I feel like ultimately we haven't had as many, knock on wood, to like high major teams that I thought we'd have.
Yeah, and I think that stuff like this is going to show up in terms of like muscle strains and hamstring issues more than it is going to be but it's also like look at teams like Tennessee. Part of the reason Tennessee's having some of their issues is just they're just so banged up at this point. You know, Yves Pons has a bad knee and John Fulkerson has a bad wrist, and there's guys on that team that are just banged. Like, and I'm sure they're not the only team that has a bunch of guys that are beat up at this point in the season.
Very true.
It's not just physically; it's mentally. So it is what it is. I don't really know like what else to say about it beyond like it's hard. And you know, it was actually very interesting. And I'll give you credit for this one. The podcast that you recorded with Bill Self, which is going to drop for us at noon today, is hearing him talk about. He actually says like winning is just not as important this year.
Right. Yep.
And it's one, it's nice to hear a coach of Bill Self's stature say that and come out publicly and say that. And two, it's something that we all need to acknowledge, right? Like it's what all of these players are going through is the same thing that you and I are going through, and the people that are listening to this are going through. And it's not easy, man. So I give these kids a lot of credit for going out there and playing as hard as they do and for as long as they have. And just to be able to make sure the NCAA gets that $900 or $900 million paycheck. That's
probably only going to be $850 this year. Just so you know, Rob, without fans in attendance, merchandise is going to go down. They're only going to get about $850. It's tough.
Unbelievable. How much do the players get into that cut?
The percentage would be a big fat zero, Robert. A big fat zero, nothing.